Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to moderate this debate, and I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists and to present them, starting with Joseph Muscat, the Prime Minister of Malta. Thank you, Joseph, for being with us today. Mr. Nicolas Schmit, who is Employment and Social Affairs Minister in Luxembourg, and also coordinator of the PES Social and Employment Ministers Network. Thank you for being with us today. Mercedes Bresso, vice-présidente du groupe du PSE au Comité des Régions. And finally, but not least, Kai Sepeni, the president of YES, the Young European Socialists. Today, we are here for a very important debate, youth unemployment, because it's about the future of a whole generation. It's almost 6 million young people unemployed. It's really shameful. It's dramatic. These young people, every day, they are waking up asking themselves, what is my future? What is my place in this society? And this is something that we can't accept. We have to provide answers to these young people. It's such an important debate that just now conservatives are starting to wake up about the issue. We have seen Chancellor Merkel now very active on the issue, so active that she would like to call for a summit, the 3rd of July, to face the issue of youth unemployment. But we have not been waiting. It's already 2 years that as PES we have started a campaign for the Youth Guarantee. And the Youth Guarantee, not to say exists now as a debate at EU level thanks to us. So I would like to give the floor to start with to Nicolas. Nicolas, you have been very active since the beginning with Commissioner Laszlo Andor to promote the Youth Guarantee. So I would like to give you the floor also to explain from where we come from with this Youth Guarantee and also what's the next steps to make sure that this Youth Guarantee will be implemented.
Thank you very much, dear friends, dear comrades. I have the impression that there is some kind of idea-jacking going around Europe because some people suddenly have discovered that we have a few million of young people without job, being in a situation of distress and despair. But what they do not do is to ask why. Why are they in this situation? What are the causes of this unacceptable situation? And the conservatives, certainly, they are now giving the impression that they are addressing youth unemployment, but they do not address the real problems which have already been mentioned by Martin, why we are in this situation. Because these 6 million young people and more, especially very many in some countries, they are not all untrained. Many of them, as Martin said, are very well trained. But they are the victims. They are the victims of an excessive austerity policy which has been imposed to these countries, including also to whole Europe. And I think we have to rebalance, we have to change this approach. Without changes in our macroeconomic policies, we will not be able to give a future, to give hope to these young people. As Martin said, the clue is growth, the clue is innovation, the clue is creation of new jobs, the clue is creation of new enterprises. But a recessive economy does not create jobs. And Europe, as globally, is in a recession. Some countries are in a recession, have been in a recession for several years. And this is the problem. These are the causes. 3 years ago, we started really, even before we started, but 3 years ago with Kaisa, we started to reflect on youth unemployment because we had this strong feeling when we saw these thousands and hundreds of thousands of young people on the street in Spain, in Greece, in Portugal, in Italy, that the socialists had one basic mission: to give a new perspective, to give a perspective to these young people. And we worked hard with Kajsa. We worked on this report with ideas how to relaunch the European economy, but also how to give especially the young people a chance. And one of these elements, central elements, is the Youth Guarantee. This is a good idea. This is a fundamental idea, which means that we will not leave these young people alone. We will not leave them on the streets. We will not leave them just without a perspective. We give them, or we oblige our countries, our governments, to give them, within 4 months, a serious offer. When we say that, this is important, but it's not enough. We have to place the Youth Guarantee in a broader, larger framework. I mentioned the economic issues, the economic policies, where we need a change. I mentioned growth, but we need also money, and I think this has been now repeated several times. I remember our Austrian friend, Rudolf Hunstoffer, came up with an idea at the beginning when we started to discuss on youth unemployment, and he said, I propose to take 10 billion euros a year to devote to fighting youth unemployment. That was an idea coming from our family. It was a proposal made even in a council meeting of the social and labor ministers to devote 10 billion euros a year to fight youth unemployment. What happened? We have now ended up with 6 billion for 7 years. This is a good start, but it's not enough. These 6 million, we need them now, rapidly, and it is only a start. I think that this will be a central debate in the European Parliament, and we as Social Democrats, we have to build a big alliance to that first the 6 billion will be approved, despite of all the other discussions on the budget or in the financial perspective. We need this money, and we need it now. But we need more than this money. We need also a strategy to support creation of enterprises, to give the European economy a new start, and especially in those countries where the budgetary constraints are high and the unemployment of young people is extremely high, because they cannot afford, they are not able to implement the Youth Guarantee. They need our solidarity, they need our support, and that's why it is so important also to focus the financial means on these countries. But it is important for us, and especially in the view of the next election, that it is made clear that we have concrete global proposals for the young generations. What the Conservatives are doing is window dressing. They even, I noticed that at the last Council of Labour Ministers, they use the idea of fighting youth unemployment finally to put aside that real debate on social Europe. No, youth unemployment or fighting youth unemployment is central. It's key for social Europe, but it is not enough. We need a broader approach, a larger approach on social Europe. And that's what we have to do in the forthcoming months, to make clear that our ideas, our proposals, our concepts are different, but they are concrete, and we want to have the young people now, rapidly. That's what they expect from us.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. I think that it was a perfect introduction, and thank you for really presenting well what are the problems, what is at stake, and what we can do. I would like to give the floor to Kajsa. Kajsa, as president of the Young European Socialists, of course, you have played a very important role in all these debates, within the family, but also outside. So I would give you the floor to explain what, as yes, you are doing in your analysis of the questions. Thank you, Kajsa.
Thank you, Janek, and thank you, Nicolas, for the good introduction. It's been a really interesting last 3 years working on this project, because it's been something that we as Young European Socialists with our member organizations in Finland and in Austria have been working on for a lot longer than that. We started working on Youth Guarantee from 2009, and then we've been campaigning on it within our movement and within the societies and trying to get more wind under the wings of it, basically. A couple of years ago, PES made a really great commitment to take it on as their top priority and on the top agenda on our initiative. Already before that, we've been working with Nicolas on the Youth Unemployment Working Group, and it's been, for a young person, for a youth organization, it's been an amazing process watching something coming from an idea that we had and something that we believed in into something that is actually now European policy, and that it's actually taking place and will happen, hopefully, in the format that we actually foresee it and what we wanted to make it happen. So for us, this has been an amazing ride, and we are really, really grateful for Nicolas and for PES and for the S&D group and all the socialist and social democratic ministers and governments who have put efforts on it. That said, I think all of us know the situation in southern European countries, in Spain, in Greece, in parts of Italy, in Portugal, where we are in a situation where there are enormous amount of young people. There are whole generations who are without future hope, who are sitting at home thinking that there is nothing that the state offers for me. There is no safety net left for me. There is not the future that I was promised for. Why should I? Why should I commit to the state, and why should I commit to the welfare of others when I get nothing back? But this is not only the situation in Southern Europe, and this is something I find very important that we remember when we discuss this issue. When we talk about youth unemployment, or generally the crisis in Europe and its effects on young people, we don't just talk about the crisis countries. We talk about every European country. Because in every European country, the youth unemployment is double that of the general unemployment. That means that you're double as likely to be unemployed and without the future hope if you are a young person than if you are older. That means that we have enormous amount of young people everywhere, also in the Nordic countries. In my home country, in Finland, we have 20% youth unemployment. In Germany, we have huge amount of young people who are either unemployed, underemployed, or in short-term, fixed-term, part-time contracts, meaning that they cannot make a living for themselves. They cannot have a start in life that they would deserve. And this comes to a very, very fundamental question about our welfare state and our social contract between the generations and between the members of the society. And today, this is something that we think and we find and we see everywhere that we have a problem with. We haven't made the commitment to young people that we will give them the future that they deserve. We ask a lot of things from them. We ask them to finish education, we ask them to pay taxes, we ask them to contribute to the society, but we do not give them back what they deserve. What the young people see is that we make commitments for banks, we make commitments for industries, we make commitments to financial sector, but we don't make the commitment for our young people. And this is why I find the Youth Guarantee so important. It is so important because it is not a plaster that will fix all the problems. It will not create jobs by itself to Spain, and it will not fix the youth unemployment situation. But it is a commitment, and it is a promise by our governments, by our movement, by our governments, by the European Union, to the young people, saying that you have a place in a society, and this society is for you as well. It is a fundamental question about welfare state that we are discussing, and we should be discussing more at the European level as well. What is it that one gets out of a state when one puts something in? It's a question about participating in a society, and this is why I find it important. I find that we should absolutely press on with the campaign, and we should not be happy with the 6 billion. I think it's quite abysmal, actually. 6 billion in 7 years means less than 1 billion a year, which means that you are not addressing the problems where they are. You are putting a plaster over a broken bone and saying that we're sure it will be healed. The 10 billion originally 2 years ago from Hunstoffel's proposal came from idea that those unused funds that we already have in the European Social Fund, we have them in other budget lines, that they could be moved and directed to this problem, because we saw that this is a priority problem, that we need to fix it. And this is something that I think the European Parliament has been doing a great job in the negotiations on the MFF, that they are demanding more flexibility between the different classes of expenditure, saying that if some money is not used for some reason, we could redirect it to somewhere where it's very important. And I think this is something that we have to demand, that redirection goes to the direction of youth unemployment projects, youth employment creation, job creation, growth for those areas which are most in dire need. And I think this is something that all our governments has to do. They have to really stick with the idea that it's not just the words, it's not just the, hey, we want to make something about it. Hey, we are so worried about the young people. We are so worried about the young people moving from Europe, from our countries. We are so worried about them not having a role. So we talk about this a lot. But now we need a real commitment. We need to really, really make sure that this happens. Because otherwise what we see is we see what we have seen in Spain. We have the young people taking it to the streets because they see no alternative, they see no role, they see that they have no voice in our system. They will take to the streets, and we have seen this in Spain, we have seen it in Portugal, we see it here in Bulgaria, we've seen it in Sweden, that young people take to the streets and they feel that they have no way of expressing themselves unless they get to the streets and protest against the entire system. And that tells us that we have a problem with an entire system, and this is something that we need to address.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Kajsa. And you're totally right about the question of the 6 billion. For us, it's only a start, and we are really pushing for first front-loading that as soon as possible, and then to have a negotiation to have even more money in the future for fighting youth unemployment. And also, you were talking about implementation. So I'm turning now to Joseph. You are now newly elected Prime Minister of Malta. Congratulations again. You have been also campaigning for the youth guarantee or fighting youth unemployment in Malta. So I would give you the floor to first introduce what you are doing in Malta. How do you see now that we have to fight for this implementation, and also at EU level, as we know, it will be an important topic next week for the European Council. We will have a meeting with all our prime ministers. You will be there. We will prepare that to make sure that we have the flagship and the ownership of the youth guarantee. So Joseph, the floor is you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yonek. Actually, we will be side by side to make the case for the youth guarantee in the most forceful manner possible. Actually, it's quite ironic for the simple reason that we're not doing this for ourselves, since the average rate of unemployment, of youth unemployment in our country is lower than the EU average, so we don't really qualify for the funds for the EU unemployment. But we're doing this because we believe in it. We believe in it, and we believe that this is the way forward. I think that we must focus on the future, and we must always be one step ahead. What has been happening in the last few months on the European scene has seen another case where the Conservatives are trying to take credit for an initiative that has been solidly in social democratic field. I think that the answer to that is not squabbling, saying, well, we came first, because I think people outside would see us like two kids squabbling on a ball, on whose ball it is. People want solutions, as Martin quite rightly said. So we must always be one step ahead. One of the shortcomings I still see, even in the proposal being put forward, is the lack of ideas with regards to self-employment as an alternative for young people. So apart from arguing quite rightly, and I fully subscribe to the ideals and to the issues related to the youth guarantee, I do believe that the next step should be more initiatives, more incentives to get people to form their own businesses. Now, this is tricky grounds for the simple reason that in best case scenario, 50% of businesses fail during their first year of formation. But I do believe that in order to really foster innovation, to really foster research, one has to see and to keep Europe from losing its best brains to go instead to work in the United States, Japan, or in other Asian countries. We need to incentivize the idea of young people setting up their own businesses. I also think that the discussion has to be put, and we need to put it in a much clearer context. We are addressing youth unemployment, but youth unemployment is a symptom. It's not a cause. What is the cause of youth unemployment? And really the cause of youth unemployment are policies which are at best schizophrenic and at worst really not planned. Policies that are emanating, unfortunately, some of them from a pan-European perspective, which suffocate governments who really want to do something to get about youth unemployment. We follow the situation in our neighbor, Italy, quite closely. We know the situation. We know that it's an emergency situation. Yet, what the Italian government is saying, rightly so, is, look, your rules that want us to incentivize young people to get into the job market are stopping us from doing that. So this is one of the points that really needs to be cleared. And I'm not referring solely to the Maastricht criteria, but many other things. Finally, there are other issues on which I believe we need to be much clearer. We cannot profess the need for more young people to get into the job market and at the same time saying that older people need to retire at an older age and expect to have both at the same time without policies fostering economic growth, because it is totally suicidal the way it is being put. And I have seen, even in the past 3 months since I've been Prime Minister, communiques emanating from the Commission and other European institutions which put forward two differing targets within a context where it makes them unachievable. So, yes, we need, it's obvious that people need to work harder and maybe longer in some countries. In our country, like in many other countries, the retirement age has been raised over the past 10 years. Yes, we need more young people to get into the job markets, but to create those jobs, we need economic growth. And finally, economic growth means opening up to markets outside Europe. Right now, I think we have a sort of, we're stuck in a rut, in the sense that we're looking at within ourselves, rather than looking to the outside world, to the developing economies, and seeing how to best to liaise with those developing economies, from where I believe most economic growth can come in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for your introduction. I think that you really put the finger on a very important issue, which is the question of the symptom and the cause. And that what we need to solve youth unemployment is especially its economic growth and coherent policies to create more investment and to create jobs in Europe. So I will turn now and give the floor to Mercedes. Mercedes, grand merci à vous d'être présente en tant que vice-présidente.
Very much for being here as Vice President in the Committee of the Regions. I'm going to give you the floor, and I'd like to thank in advance the Committee of the Regions for your very interesting publication have received in their dossiers. It's very important to recap in that way. Now, how do you look at local development and the role of local authorities? Yes, that's what I'm going to start with. We in the Socialist Party have worked a lot on the Youth Guarantee initiative. It's the local and regional authorities that are the best place to tackle unemployment. They put in place policies to fight unemployment using the structural funds, the European Social Fund. So they're crucial if we want to achieve results. I'd like to say something about the time aspect. At local level, at the moment, everybody is ready. They're drawing up their programs and they're waiting for the funds to arrive. We were told a year ago that they were coming. We were told that there were going to be 6 billion for the Youth Guarantee project. But we're still waiting. Initially, We thought that this money was going to come from existing funds, from unused resources in existing funds. Now it looks as if we're going to have to wait another year and a half before we can say to young people, yes, the tools are there, the instrument is ready, make your applications, we'll be ready to respond. The second thing I'd like to say, I mean, as you quite rightly said, we are responsible in most countries for local development programs and policies. I don't think there's any way that Europe can imagine that it's going to be able to get out of this crisis unless it provides momentum for young people. How can we possibly relaunch the European economy, which needs to start out again on new bases, innovation of all kinds, scientific, technological, social innovation? How can we hope to do that without drawing fully, sorry, microphone problem. Sorry, I seem to be touching my microphone. This isn't only a social issue. It's a crucial economic policy issue. And therefore, we need not only for these resources to be increased, we need them to trigger far more complex policies, because to help young people, it's not enough to give them a training course or a part-time job. You have to be able to offer them a future, which means resources for research, resources for startups, so that young people, when they're receiving training under the Youth Guarantee, can develop their ideas and then actually implement those ideas, help them to find the capital that they need. I'm not saying that it should be done free of charge, but help them to invest, create startup centers with universities. We need to rewrite policies around the Youth Guarantee. Relaunching Europe in economic terms requires the active participation of young people. And they're losing faith in us. We're losing them. And there's another problem that came up yesterday when we were talking about Women Up, a problem that has cropped up again and again. We know that it is amongst young women that the unemployment rate is highest. Nearly all of them are unemployed in some countries. We're talking about 60–70%. We know that it is young women who are the best trained when they graduate. But then, as far as lifelong learning is concerned, their needs are not met at all. They're not able to adapt to changes in the market. So we have a specific young women's issue to look at as part of our general youth unemployment problem. And we need tailor-made instruments and mechanisms to help young women to create a career pathway for themselves rather than abandoning them halfway through. Thank you for that. At least one woman agrees with me. You all agree. Good. All right then. Well, when it comes to the European Council and the socialists in the European Council, what we hope that they're going to do is to underline the need for a global intervention, a complex of policies, structural policies in this area. We may have fewer young people in Europe than on other continents, but they're highly trained, highly skilled. Many of them are still in training, and yet they're being disappointed. We need to give them a future. We need to give them prospects. It would be absolutely terrifying if the anecdote that Martin Schulz told us were to become reality. Young Europeans wishing to find jobs abroad who are prevented from doing so, who can't find jobs within Europe. I think they can have a future in Europe. They must have a future in Europe, and that must be the central point of our electoral campaign next year. We mustn't allow other people to hijack this initiative. It was our idea. And if we look at the way that the right wing has reinterpreted it, it would never work. It'll never happen. It will never be the linchpin for a broader initiative to relaunch the European economy. So we still have a great deal on our plates. As you said, Joseph, I went along to support him during the election campaign, and I very much appreciated the fact that he took as one of the central themes the Youth Guarantee, knowing that he's going to have to fund it to a large extent from his own resources. Thank you.
Et merci surtout pour avoir rappelé et remis la question.
Thank you, Mercedes, and thank you very much indeed for putting the issue of youth unemployment in a broader context and reminding us that it is young women who are hard hit, young women in particular, who are being particularly hard hit on our labour markets. Zita, with the Women's Up campaign, is tackling this issue.
There is several interventions from the floor, so I would give the floor to delegates. I have two on my list. I have Jutta Steinruck, member of the European Parliament from the SPD. So Jutta, welcome. And we give you the floor, please. Thank you.
Dear comrades, I'm going to speak German because the one I'm addressing is perhaps don't understanding English. Sehr geehrte Frau Bundeskanzlerin Merkel.
Chancellor Merkel, I would like to clarify something today. It is the European Social Democrats that put the theme of youth unemployment on the European agenda. Mrs. Merkel, it was the European Social Democrats that took the idea of the Youth Guarantee and put it on the European agenda. Mrs. Merkel, it is heads of state and government from the Social Democrat parties that have introduced youth guarantees in their countries or are in the process of doing so. Mrs. Merkel, 4,000 young Spaniards are welcome in Germany. They're very welcome. But it doesn't solve the problem of youth unemployment in Europe. Mrs. Merkel, your drive for savings has made youth unemployment a bigger issue, a bigger problem in the countries that are suffering. Cutting the EU budget, Mrs. Merkel. 6 million being shifted from one place to another, that doesn't solve the issue of youth unemployment in Europe either. Mrs. Merkel, all of these things are simply not enough. We need deeds. We need an answer for young people. We need a summit. We don't need a summit in Berlin. What we need is deeds. Young people in Europe need recovery programs. We have to create jobs. That's been said very clearly here. We have to provide resources for a youth guarantee. 21 billion euros, the ILO says we need. Shame on you, Mrs. Merkel. Shame on you for electioneering in Berlin with your conservative friends to the detriment of young people in Europe who need solutions, not electioneering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jutta. There is a second intervention. It's Udo Bullmann, also MEP from Germany. Udo, yes, the floor is yours. Thank you, Udo.
Liebe Genossinnen und Genossen,
Comrades,
Jutta Steinruck hat es angesprochen.
Jutta Steinruck has raised the burning
Wir
issue.
glauben ihnen keine Sekunde.
We don't believe them. We don't believe them for a moment when just before the elections they start declaring that they have a heart for young people. Ladies and gentlemen, we've looked at the conditions for the countries in the south of Europe, the Memoranda of Understanding, and we know what those conditions entail. Low wages go down, pensions go down. Prospects for future economic development are hindered. So they have to go, ladies and gentlemen, they're lying, they're lying. We have to get rid of them. They're not young people's friends, not in reality. They're just preparing for the elections. And all the German Social Democrats here in our delegation today can assure you that the SPD takes this subject seriously. We take fighting youth unemployment seriously in Germany and in France and in Italy and in Spain and in Greece. What does this mean in practice? How can we make headway? I have an appeal to all of us here. We have influence in the Council and in our member states. I don't believe that appeals are going to take us any further. I believe that we have to make these requirements binding. We need binding targets, binding objectives. We have the decision-making process, this European semester, but we're not really legislating for economic modernization. And what about the target of reducing youth employment? That has to be put on paper so that the member states can take it seriously, put it at the top of the agenda. And nothing at all is going to happen if we don't move away from bilateral agreements and bring in control through the European Parliament. Help us to do that, to give the European Parliament power of control of scrutiny, where money is spent on a transnational basis. That's the only way that we really have. Help us, help the European Parliament to become a body with power of scrutiny and control, and that will help us forward.
Thank you very much, Jutta. And of course, as PES, we are with you for your campaign, supporting you all the best. We will be present on the 3rd of July in Berlin, while Madame Merkel, Chancellor Merkel, would like to do a big show. We would be there to show that we, as PES, we have been the initiator of the campaign, together with our ministers for social affairs and employment. Nicolas will be there, and all of them, to remind that we were the initiators. So we are coming closer to the conclusion to our debate, so I would like to give the floor to all our speakers for 1 minute conclusion. So I would start to my left with Joseph.
No, I think what we need to do now is always be forthcoming, look at the future. Yes, we have to stress the point that the ideas we came up with them ourselves, but let's not stop there. Let's look forward to the next step, to the next new youth guarantee that we will have to put forward with new ideas that will come up from a grassroots level, as this youth guarantee idea came up by sharing national experiences and best practices.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joseph. Mercedes.
I'd like to go back to some of the things that our German colleagues said, things that Martin Schulz said as well. How do we find the resources? How do we find the funds? Well, in this morning's discussion, some ideas have already been expressed. First of all, we have the financial transaction tax. Not only the tax, actually, there is all the tax that, all the money that is presently in the tax havens. And then there are the policies of the European Central Bank. They need to be corrected. The bank is printing money, but it's printing money for the banks. We've seen the scale of the interventions that have taken place so far to save the European banking system, the sheer scale of that. Why not have a similarly large program, not only the Youth Guarantee, but investment in research to help young people to use their talents? Why would that not be possible? Why couldn't that be done with the two European banks, the European Central Bank, the European Investment Bank? Together, they could provide the resources that aren't available in the countries, because even in Germany there are very strict rules as far as the budget is concerned. But there are opportunities out there. And I think that this is the socialists' task, to highlight very clearly where the resources can be found, to bring about a major renaissance of Europe. For those suggestions, I now turn to Nicolas.
The future of Europe is at stake because we cannot build this future of Europe with a lost generation. And therefore really, we have to put as one of our major objectives the fight against youth unemployment. But I have to say that the solutions cannot be only mobility for the young. Mobility is part of Europe, has always been part of Europe. But we cannot tell the young people, just move around Europe and try to find a job elsewhere. That's not building the future of the countries who need their well-trained young people to restructure, to rebuild their economies. So this is not the way how we can do it. Certainly, we have to offer all the young people mobility, but that's not the solution for Europe. And second, yes, we need well-trained young people, but we need also to have a look at the less young people. It's not a solution to say, let's reform labor markets, to fire the older ones more easily, to give a job to the young. That's not our view how labor markets should function. We have also to take this on board and this into account. And third, yes, money, funds is essential. And we have to fight in the forthcoming weeks and months to make available the money, the European money, as Mercedes said, which is there, including the EIB, which can intervene more heavily on that to build a new European economy for our young. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas. Kaiser?
Thank you. I think I would just like to conclude or say in two kind of issues. I think the issue about youth unemployment, and especially on the campaign on Youth Guarantee, it's both important and it's symbolic. It is important because whatever happens in one of the European countries affects all of the others, and this should be more evident now than it ever was. If we have a problem with youth unemployment in Spain, it does influence everywhere else, especially when you have it in several countries. It is important because we are facing a situation where we're losing entire generation, and it is important because it will have reflective effects for the next 70 years, because the young generation who does not get the first job will have the influence of that period of unemployment at the beginning of their career until they retire, so until they die. So the next 70 years, this situation will carry with us and it will reflect on us. So this is what makes it very important to sort it out for the individual level, for the social level, for the societal level, because we will carry it with us for the decades to come. Why it is symbolic is also very important. Youth Guarantee, as I said, is not one solution fix all problems, but it is very symbolic because it's a question about our welfare states, it's a question about the commitment we make for our people, it is a question about what message we send as socialists and social democrats as well. It's a question of whether we are committed to welfare state and welfare and well-being of all of our citizens and all the parts of our society. And I think this is important today in this environment when we have conservative left governments being in power for so long in Europe, and when we see so much welfare state retrenchment, we see cutting of budgets not only at the national level but also at the European level. We're having a first generation in the history of the modern welfare state which is worse off than our parents. And this is the message that they are sending, that this is okay, and it will something that will pass, and we will just move on as nothing happened. And it's a question whether we as socialists and social democrats have a different story, have a different narrative and different message that we want to send. So it's important and symbolic, and I really hope that we will continue fighting for it until we reach it.
Yes, we will do. Thank you very much, Kaiser. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Indeed, that's the real issue of these debates, is to provide a future to this generation, not to have a lost generation. We have millions of young people that are in despair, and it's our commitment to provide some hope, some future for them. It is crucial, we have said it, for economic reasons, we need investment, we need growth, we need new initiative. It's important for social reasons, we need to protect and to develop the welfare state. And it's also, I believe, important for democratic reasons, because we cannot leave a whole generation without having a future, because this will have an impact, of course, politically and democratically, if we have a generation that is not active. This is our flagship. We will not let the issue be hijacked by the conservative. We see the attempt, but we will really point out that it has been said, the finger on the cause of the crisis and not on the symptom. And the cause is that we need a new orientation of Europe. We need growth. We need to stop with this austerity-only policy to provide hope for all young people, to provide a fairer future, as it is the title of our council, and to give perspective for these young people. But not only to young people, as we have said, it's a global issue. It's young people, it's middle-aged people, it's old people. We have about 26 million unemployed people in Europe. That's too much. This is our global fight, fighting unemployment globally, I mean, in Europe, but at the different level. So I would like to give the floor to Alfredo Rubalcaba to concretely make the appeal of this council to fight youth unemployment. So, Alfredo, I'm very glad to call you on the floor and to present the appeal that we will adopt today in the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, comrades, and thank you to the leadership of the PES for giving me the floor on this occasion and allowing me to speak on a subject which is of concern to all of us, youth unemployment. And coming from a country like Spain, where almost half of young people are jobless, you can imagine just how big a concern it is for me. And in my speech, I'm going to try to reflect this shared concern. I'm going to try to make it clear that this is the right moment for starting on the way towards a solution. As has been said during the round table, what is at stake here is the future of the European Union. The future of the European Union as we know it. The Bulgarian Prime Minister, who was here this morning, said that there's a very important council next week. And it's true that it's extremely important. Important, amongst other things, because little by little, although very slowly, things are starting to change as far as European economic policy is concerned. It's happening slowly. At the moment, it's mostly rhetoric. But there are small changes in the rhetoric of the European Union, of the Commission, of even the main European political leaders on the right. We have more social democrats in the Council. And the fact is that economic policy so far, the economic policy of the right, has been a disaster, a failure for many member states because of the social model that they have tried to impose in the European Union. The social model, relationships between citizens, between states and their peoples. And if we look at the economic policies of the right, it's patently clear that it is not our policies that have failed, not the policies of the socialists and the social democrats. They didn't cause the global financial crisis. Our policies, our social models did not make the global crisis into a European crisis. Our policies did not prevent us from seeing the end of the tunnel after 5 years of crisis. And the crisis has affected our young people. We now have a jobless army, young people in precarious employment, young people who are ready to accept the employment conditions that their parents and grandparents fought against, young people who are ready to give up their rights because otherwise they won't get a job. And for many years, we socialists, I mean, if we have any values at all, our key value is solidarity. Another key value is equality, equality between citizens and between generations. We do not believe that young people are condemned to have no future. They have a right to a future, to full lives. We believe that we cannot offer our young people a worse future than the one that we dreamt of when we were young. This claim made by the European right that the European youth can be offered a future of precarity and uncertainty could endanger the future of the European Union, because it might lead young people to reject the model of the European Union. Jean Monnet many years ago said that the success of Europe would depend on how it tackled its crises. The methods, the mechanisms adopted to tackle crises. And now we see how true that is. If we don't offer the right way out of the crisis that jobless young people are facing, we will be putting at stake the future of the European Union. And as I've said, things are changing in the European Union very, very slowly. I mean, if you listen to what Angela Merkel has been saying over the past few months, she has shown a growing concern for youth employment. And European leaders on the right are talking about youth unemployment. Now, they're not doing any more than that. It's all words, but no money up front. The right has wanted to keep in place a European framework where only 6 billion are available to fight youth unemployment. How can we explain that to the hordes of young unemployed people in Europe? 0.3% of what we spent on recapitalizing our banks with public money, that's what we're willing to give to them. It's impossible to explain something like that. And that's why Martin is right when he says that we need to change things. We need to get the right to change and allocate sufficient budgets, sufficient envelopes to tackle youth unemployment. Last Saturday, I, like Martin, had the honour of listening to a truly fantastic speech by Jacques Delors, a fantastic speech in which he reminded people that for the socialists, Europe is 4 things: competitiveness, social cohesion, solidarity, and democracy. Those 4 pillars have been part and parcel of the political project created by the European Socialists and Social Democrats. And all of these 4 things relate to youth employment. How can we improve European competitiveness? If we abandon our youth and don't make sure that they are better skilled, how can we have social cohesion in Europe? If we have divisions in Europe between those who have jobs and those who don't, i.e. the young, how can we talk about solidarity if we're incapable of creating an employment plan? How can we say that Europe defends democracy if the right is ignoring young people, the people who are demanding democracy? These are the values that the Socialists and the Social Democrats defend. I'll wind up. Next week's council is extremely important. It's important because hope has been awakened. Because for weeks and months now, they've been hearing people talk about youth unemployment. Expectations have been awakened, expectations that the council will take action to tackle young people's problems. The Social Democrats have never ceased to put young people on the agenda, and that is why we're making the appeal that we're making today. That's why it's important that we issue this appeal today, to remind people that it was us who talked about youth unemployment. It is us who were behind the Youth Guarantee. It is we socialists who fought hard to put this subject on all ministers' agendas, as it is today. And as Martin said, what's important is that solutions should come out of all of this. We need to make sure that our prime ministers make this into a council where deeds are decided upon. Political rhetoric is not going to be enough. If that's all that comes out of this council, it will produce disaffection, disappointment. What we need are programs to fight youth unemployment. As was said during the roundtable, think of the European Investment Bank. Think of helping SMEs, so that these SMEs can then hire young people. It's important too to talk about youth mobility, to talk about the Erasmus program, vocational training, very important for the countries of the South. All of those things have to be discussed at this council. And we want it to deliver measures that will make it clear to young people that Europe is concerned about them. I've talked about Jacques Delors. I've talked about the golden age of the European Union, when there was clearer political momentum. If we look back at what's happened, we have to realize that 20 years down the line, we're not better off in many ways. And the problem is that it's young people who are bearing the brunt of this. So it's important to repeat what Martin said up here on this stage. The upcoming elections are extremely important because we have to change European policy. We have to change European policies to save a certain idea of Europe. And then, using that idea of Europe, we must help the millions of Europeans who are suffering, who are going through hard times, the millions of young people who are jobless, who are looking for what the socialists have always wanted to give them: decent lives in a Europe of solidarity, shared values and a shared future. That's all I wanted to say, ladies and gentlemen.
Muchas gracias, Alfredo. Dear colleagues, so the appeal on the youth unemployment was presented. Now we would like to ask you for the support for this appeal which was presented by Alfredo. So I would like to ask you, who is in favor, to raise your cards? Thank you. Who is against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. So I can say that we just adopted the appeal on the youth unemployment. Thank you very much. And now I would like to thank the panelists of Jonek Polet who discussed on the youth unemployment. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask the Deputy Secretary General of the Party of European Socialists, Mara Lefebvre, and her panelists who will discuss the other panel on democracy.
Where is
We have zero.
also?
Where are you going to sit?